Okay, so look, morning everybody. Welcome to another Getting Warmer Tuesday. And today's PD session is looking at collaborative engagement tools, and specifically we're going to be looking at 3 that the university has licensing for or is imminently about to have licensing available for, and I'll clarify that shortly when it comes to Miro. But effectively, we have 3 different tools that will be supported that you are able to use either synchronously or asynchronously with students, where they can hop in together, in most cases anonymously, and create content, respond to things, or if the need is there, I guess the tools can also be used quite passively. And generally speaking, I like to approach this from easiest to most challenging, perhaps, in terms of new users to get to know these tools. So I'm going to look briefly at Padlet, and a lot of staff are already quite familiar with Padlet, but we'll look at the Padlet tool set and what it offers. Then we'll crank it up a little bit to Zoom Whiteboards, and then we're going to round things out with Miro, which is a new tool that CSU is getting an enterprise license available to all staff for within the next fortnight. And so I'll be showing you the features that we can access currently, that anyone can access when they sign up for a free account. And I'll also point out the features that will be available to us once the enterprise licensing is switched on. So does that all sound okay to everybody? All right. I will spend more time really looking at kind of the back end of these tools and the building process. I'm not going through a massive slide deck, but I will start with just this one slide that I have on the screen, where we used to run a session around collaborative workspaces, where we were looking at tools like Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets and what have you. And a lot of the principles or questions that we ask about why we use these tools align, really. And so I guess I'll just look at those briefly in terms of collaborative engagement tools, why we might use them, why they might be appealing to students. And one reason really is central location or accessibility for the tool or the activity that you want that doesn't necessarily revolve around the LMS, around the learning management system. So that means you can build the thing somewhere and give people links to go to it. Now, if that works out for you, then it happens to be within i2 or Brightspace or wherever, then great. And they all have the ability in one way or another to be connected to learning management systems. But you can also give people the ability to access them elsewhere otherwise, maybe through emails, maybe through announcements, maybe through some other mechanism for students to access. So having them centrally located outside of the LMS can sometimes be quite beneficial. It also gives us the ability to have a repository of sorts for different types of objects that sit outside, again, outside the LMS. And you will hear detractors to the idea that anything outside of the LMS is a bad thing. We want everything located within it, but I don't really subscribe to that school of thought. I like having more options personally, and if it relates to the activity, I'd like it to be with the activity. So that's usually my thinking on that one. Most of these activities give us an ability to differentiate between an individual contribution and a group contribution. Just depends on the type of activity you're putting together and the instructions that you give to the students, obviously. There are opportunities for peer-to-peer engagement. And as I mentioned before, the idea of risk or safety in these types of tools is an important one, because in most cases, where they're anonymous and it allows you to participate without identifying yourself, it can have a positive effect in terms of people don't feel shy in taking part, but also potentially, if it's not a safe space or people haven't had the right sort of netiquette or other ground rules established, it can also potentially be a problematic space. And I can see Tracy looking thoughtful on that one, maybe. Have you experienced these sorts of tools where maybe anonymous is not a good thing from your perspective?
Well, yes, particularly from a secondary perspective, because there's always one kid that doesn't know how to behave online for other people, and yeah, you got to end up following that up. But more and more that translates to always one adult too. So yeah, sometimes anonymous works, sometimes it doesn't.
Absolutely.
You've got to know your cohort, haven't you?
Yeah, and it also implies that potentially you have to think about the prospect of moderation in some respect. Yeah. Sometimes the tools will give us the ability to moderate automatically through things like a profanity filter. But otherwise, if you are completely leaving students to their own devices within a collaborative workspace, you have to acknowledge that there is potentially a risk element there. And the last part that I'll point out really is the opportunity to use things live, synchronously or asynchronously. And each of the three tools that we use today, we have the opportunity for both of those types of engagement, some more so than others. All right, now as promised, that's about all I'm going to look at in terms of slide decks. I'd like to spend the rest of the time in the tools themselves. So we'll get cracking. I'm going to add the cheat sheet for Padlet into the chat for you if you haven't got it already. But the guide for that has been around for quite some time. Effectively, that document, if I open it, will look like this, and really it will take you from woe to go. So if you don't want to listen to me at all and you'd rather just play with Padlet, you can certainly do that. But this will basically take you through the fact that you need to go to build any Padlet. We start at this base address at charlestonuni1.padlet.org. And you sign in and start creating, but it is predicated on having an account. And that detail is at the bottom of that first page. If you don't have a Padlet account already, you simply email padlet@CSU, and the subject line being account request with your name. And then within the body, the name, your faculty, school, etc., and your email address. I don't know about phone number. They're not calling you, but anyway. And they will provision an account to you. DIT will provision a Padlet account for you within 24 hours. So that's the spiel on how to access Padlet itself. Now let's get into actually using the tool.
But Lachlan, for educational designers, we would be building within not our own account, would we? We'd be attaching that to the subject account.
Look, to be honest, you can build within your own accounts. You might be thinking of H5P, which is has a central WordPress folder for each of the tools rather than Padlet. Padlet's just created at individual user accounts.
Okay.
Yep. I'll have a look at sharing when we get into building some of these as well, so we can cover that scenario. It's a good question. All right. So look, I've gone to charlestonuni1.padlet.org. Now, my dashboard in here happens to have many, many, many Padlets in there that I've been exposed to over time. But what I'm going to do is start with making a new Padlet up the top. If I click on make a new Padlet, it asks me to choose a format. And if I hover, it'll give me an image of what they look like, each of those Padlet boards or Padlet walls. So a canvas means the post can go kind of anywhere and you can draw some relational arrows. A timeline puts them next to each other and we'll end up actually showing a continuum underneath with times on it. A grid lines them up in columns, for example, and along the horizontal continuum as well. A stream is more of a social media, Facebook-esque type single stream of posts, one after the other. A wall, which is far and away the most common type of Padlet wall that people create, means that it will add the newest post to the top left of the wall, and every subsequent post will then go to the top left and push the others across and then down the page. And lastly, the map format, which allows you to actually have tools like Google Maps in the background. And when people add posts, they have to choose a physical location of where they are before they add their contribution. That's actually quite an interesting one. We'll have a look at that together in a second. Just to give you an idea of what some of these posts, Padlet walls look like, we've got a few around. This is a Padlet wall using what they call shelving, which means you get a heading above each of the columns. You can click the plus to add new posts, which will then go within that column if you needed to. And then you put in Subject line, you have the opportunity to add many different types of media, and that's one of Padlet's main appeals, is how easy it is to add multimodal content. So if you want to add an image, if you wanted to attach a file, hyperlinks, record a video, just audio, do a screencast, for example, do a screen recording of what's going on, or attach different objects from the web, you can do all of those things and it will attach them to your post. And you can also type into the body text underneath. Change the color of your post if you're that kind of person that you want different color posts going on. Hit publish, and it will post that within the stream underneath. Now, this is someone else's wall, so I'm not going to post to it. I'll do that on my own, but you can see here, they've got hyperlinks, for example, for objects. They've also got files. There's an Excel spreadsheet, for example, in there that's been added, and you can click on those and then open the files. So Padlet walls effectively allow you to very quickly create a common space for people to come and access things, whether they're files, media, hyperlinks, recordings, etc. And usually it all revolves around just clicking on the plus to add your contribution. So this was a Padlet wall with columns and shelving, which means headings above each of the different types of content. Again, we can see these guys have used headings within each of their columns to organize different types of content. They've linked out to external web pages, or they've attached files, or in some cases, there's PowerPoint here. This one's linked to a Zoom recording. That's another wall. Let's find a different one. Here's a map. This is probably a good one. If I full screen this.
Can I interrupt you there, Lachlan, please?
Go ahead. Yep.
Just on that, or any of them, particularly that wall one, can I reuse that, or do I have to rebuild it? Because it's got all the information there, but I don't want that if I want to carry it forward to something new.
That's a really good question. You can do both. So if you want to reuse an existing wall, you can clear all of the existing posts and just keep using it, or you can duplicate the wall and put the copy somewhere else. So you've got either option, really. Yep.
Okay.
So we're going to build our own Padlet wall in a second, but the map format that I talked about, and I would like to actually open this up in a separate web page if I can find the option to do so. Normally we go for that one. There we go. What we get, and this particular Padlet wall is asking students to say, where are they? You can see that it is summarizing some of the postings, but each time someone makes a contribution to this wall, they hit the plus sign and they have to search for where they are. So I'm in Bathurst, New South Wales. I could be quite specific and say CSU Bathurst, and then it's giving me Charles Sturt University. So this is using Google Maps and the satellite radar. Charles Sturt University, Bathurst. And then if they were asking me to put other text in, studying paramedicine, for example, I'm sure that's a legitimate scenario here in Bathurst, and I can publish that, and then it adds my pin to the wall, and you can see the most recent one is summarized here. So the map is quite commonly used for this type of activity, sort of getting to know people. Another one that another way that it's used very commonly is for students to do introductions. If I can find any one of those. Well, here's a Padlet wall that's actually been embedded on a landing page where they've actually added weekly posts or contributions. The lecturers put these up passively so the students can read these. They can't interact with it. They can't comment on it. In fact, all they can do with it is click on a like symbol to respond. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. So she's linked to particular images or articles as a way of providing updates on the landing page for the students. And the newest post will be added to the top. So she's got animated GIFs and other things going on, but that's sitting on the landing page, making it dynamic, so to speak. All right, let's get into building our own Padlet wall. I'm going to choose a plain wall. So it's already published the wall. It's now up to me to configure it. So let's give it a title. Lachlan's amazing Padlet wall. The description is simply the subtext that goes underneath. So maybe instructions or other things go in here. If that's going in underneath, you'll see the text is appearing up there in the corner. Do I want an icon next to the title? Why not? There you'll see that it's added the icon. There's a huge library of icons and emojis and other things. Do I really want this bland cardboard wallpaper? Probably not. You can go through colors, you can go through textures and patterns, you can go through the full gamut, images that they already have in there, for example, or you can also upload your own. So if you click on custom, for example, any image that you like, you can upload and use that as your wallpaper background as well. Just depends whether or not it has a high enough resolution. For today, I'm simply going to choose one of these more colorful ones. That'll do. And hit save. And now we continue our customization. Do I want a particular font? There's only 4 styles. I don't care too much there. Grouping posts by section. So if you remember the headings that we had before, those columns, if you want to put those in place, you can turn on the grouping option. Then we get down to, do I want to see the author and the timestamp? This is kind of irrelevant for our use case for Padlet because students don't have Padlet accounts. So the only person that's going to get identified when we do timestamps is me, is the creator when I make posts. So it's not really that valuable turning on timestamps and authors. And if you're doing an activity where you want students to identify themselves, that's going to need to be part of the instructions. Make sure in the title of your post, you put your name in brackets or something like that. You need to be quite overt about Padlet. Otherwise, it's going to be anonymous. Do you want people to be able to comment on other people's posts? Yes or no? You can toggle that one off. Do you want them to be able to react to each other's posts? And if so, how? Before we had the option of being able to like things. So that, I guess that follows the old, if you don't have anything nice to say, you're not saying anything. That's generally a fairly popular one, kind of safe. Then you have upvoting or downvoting. You can star posts 1 to 5 stars. So again, we're getting into that territory of people being able to, I suppose, position some people's content above others. Maybe that's the purpose. Maybe that's a problem. And then the last option is giving grades to things. Do you really want to be able to do that? It's not connected to our assessment in any way. It doesn't link to any of our other tools. But if you were going to give a score out of a certain amount, you could do that as well. I'm just going to turn on the likes, hit save. Do you want to moderate every single post coming into the board? Then you probably turn on approval. I don't do that generally. Do you want to turn on the profanity filter? You could turn that on. Replacing bad words with emojis. I haven't given this a test. It might be quite a fun exercise to do at some point. Not today. All right. At that point, my wall is ready to go. And if I hit the cross, the wall is live now. But if I wanted to share it with you, I've got 2 ways of doing that. I can just highlight the address in the address bar and simply put that in the chat here, which will allow you all to click on that and go straight to the board. But the other option I have is clicking on the share option, which is the arrow in the top right-hand corner. It opens up the share settings. What you're going to find at CSU by default, our walls are kept as what's called secret, which means that people need the link to be able to go to the wall. You can't search for these online and find them. Someone needs to provide you with the hyperlink. And by default, people who go to the wall can post to the wall. So that's the 2 options that we have, that they're secret and that visitors are able to write to the wall. If I clicked on change privacy, I can then switch that to, for example, if I just wanted a private wall that only I could add to. Those are probably the only 2 options I would be entertaining. The moment you start putting passwords onto walls, then you're going to need to provide password information to people somewhere. So consider that, but sometimes people will change the visitor permissions, potentially saying that we only want them to be able to read what goes onto the wall. So when we saw that use case for people having it on their landing pages where there's information for students to read, but I don't want them making posts on there as well, you would switch the visitor permissions to can read rather than can read and can write. All right, so that's the change privacy option. If you want other collaborators to be able to also control what's happening to the wall, you would need to add them. And this is predicated on them also having a Padlet account, having signed up the way we did at the beginning. So for example, if I looked for a Stuart in here, I can see Stuart McKinney is top of the list and I can add him. And then I can then decide what permissions he has to this wall. Do I want him to be able to edit on there? Do I also want to make him an administrator so he can do things with the wall? And at that point now, I have a co-administrator of my Padlet wall that can also access this. When he logs into Padlet, he'll be able to see this same wall. So that's how you would share access to a wall, so to speak, Stuart, if you had a co-contributor. And then we have a few other options. Before I get into this, other ways of sharing what's going on in the Padlet wall, your ability to contribute to this wall would revolve around clicking on the plus and adding in your post and deciding what else you wanted to do to the wall. So again, it comes down to the intention of the activity. And we hit publish and you'll see it puts it in the middle, and as more people add to the wall, it will push them over to the top left. That's how the walls behave. Now, if I go back into my share settings, we also have the option of a feature called slideshow within Padlet. And what that will do is it will work through each of the posts that have been added to the wall as a PowerPoint presentation. So that might be of value to you if you want a different way of presenting content rather than using PowerPoint. If I took one of these Padlet walls that had been created with all of these different posts and things, and I clicked on that present option, the play icon, it now turns it into a presentation where I can work through each of the posts, just like a PowerPoint presentation, basically. So you can use a Padlet wall as a presentation tool as well. What I want to show you is that we can also take our Padlet walls and put them into our websites if we want them to be asynchronously used. So that involves either giving people the link, as I've done with you in the chat here today, or embedding the Padlet wall. And the way we embed is we click on the share icon up the top, go down to embed in your blog or website, and then we can click on copy here, which will copy this embed code. And let's assume that we wanted to put it into an I2 site, for example. I can find an I2 site where I might want to post it. Let's find one. That'll do. All right, so I'm in an I2 site, any I2 site. I can click on build content, make a new item. And then inside the content area, I need to switch across to the code view, which is these two arrows here. And I'm going to paste, Control V, the content that I just copied. Hit save. And my Padlet wall there is now live and sitting in the subject site. I'll just hit submit. And that'll be added right to the bottom. And now your Padlet wall is a part of your subject site, which means that your students can now come in to the subject site and simply click on the cross. They don't have to go anywhere else, click on anything else. They can simply start contributing to the Padlet wall within the subject site. So when people are making those orientation, getting to know you type Padlet walls, introductions, it's as easy as that. Create the board, get the embed code embedded in your subject site. All right. What I'm going to suggest with Padlet really is that you spend some time after you've got an account looking at those different formats that we discussed, because to be honest, the use cases for Padlet are almost infinite. It's very, very easy. You create the walls instantly and people can start contributing straight away in a variety of ways, whether it's video, text, image, audio, web pages, in groups, individually. Really, it's quite limitless. And very, very easy for your users to come in. It's literally a one click and start contributing type tool for them to use. The only real decision is about the format that you want to use for your Padlet, because it displays the information differently depending on whether you want to use a normal wall like this, whether you want to try and organize content under headings, whether you're thinking of using a map type Padlet tool, for example, or some of the other options like the timeline. All right, I think I want to move on to Zoom Whiteboards so we can have a look at our next tool.
Just before you
Go ahead.
on, do you know if it's possible to change, say, that wall format to a canvas format, or is it locked in once you've done that?
No, you can absolutely change the format. So the way that we do that is if you click on the three dots over here on the right-hand side, when you're looking at your wall, you'll see a change format option, and then you can switch to one of the others. So if I decided I didn't want to use the wall and instead I wanted a timeline, you can see that it's now moved it along that horizontal continuum instead. And you then have to configure how the timeline actually looks. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can change
Can
the
I ask you a
formats.
question about the wall? When you
Please.
had, not that one, but it had all the different posts on it. This is just because I'm teaching background, reminds me of Google Classroom. Are you then able to move them as to what order you want them in, or is it always going to be chronological?
Of your question, you're able to click and drag and readjust the position of the posts. This is actually telling me that my internet connection is unstable. Huh.
Yeah, it just said that to me too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Did you see my answer? Sorry, Danielle.
Yeah, that you did say yes, you can drop and drag them wherever you want them.
Yeah, you can move them into other columns. You can move them into other sections. You can rearrange the order. Left click and drag. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a really good question. And if you want to add additional sections, you can certainly do that as well. Stuart, your question earlier about reusing them as well, you'll see that there's an arrow icon up here that allows you to either to remake the entire Padlet wall. It'll make a copy, and then you decide whether or not you want to retain the posts that are in there,
Okay.
the layout, etc., the people that have access to the wall. So you can also remake the Padlet walls very easily.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Zoom Whiteboards. We're going to race through this one so we can spend some time on Miro. Zoom Whiteboards, basically, if we start with the idea that we have a whiteboarding tool within our online meeting space, which any host will then be able to see they can access through their Zoom settings down the bottom. What I want to show you is that, in fact, your whiteboards all exist in the back end of Zoom when you go to charlessturt.uni.zoom.us, sign into your Zoom account. You'll see a Whiteboards tab in the nav on the left-hand side. If you haven't created any before, then this section underneath will be empty, but you'll see a whole bunch of templates there that you can also choose from if you're looking for inspiration in terms of how you'd like to use your Zoom whiteboard. Otherwise, you just click on New Whiteboard. So this is effectively creating walls in advance, and then I'll show you how to access them in the live meeting. If I just wanted a blank wall with nothing else in it, I can actually just close out this templates section and it gives me a blank canvas. So this whiteboard now exists ready for people to use. But what I want to show you is that if I give this a title, by the way, clicking up the top here, let's call it Lachlan's PD whiteboard. Okay. It's been updated. So this now exists live in the cloud. It's waiting there. I might just click on the share settings up in the top right-hand corner to determine how I want it to be used. Do I want anyone to be able to access that? Do I want to allow external users, so non-CSU verified users? I do. I really do. So I'm going to check that box. And I'm going to say they can also invite other people, which just means giving them the link to the whiteboard. I want to make sure if people have got the link, they can contribute to the whiteboard. I'm now going to copy the link. And you'll see here, only invited members can access this board. I'm changing that. And I'm going to say anyone with the link can access this board. Now, if I copy the link, one way of sharing my whiteboards, either in this live meeting or in my subject site or anywhere else, would simply be to share the link in the Zoom meeting, etc. And people would be able to go to the board. So that's one way of sharing it asynchronously, for example. However, the other way, and this is probably of more interest to you if you're in Zoom meetings themselves, is within the Zoom space. So you can see my Zoom dashboard here. Look down the bottom for whiteboards. There's the whiteboard icon. It's going to access my backend, my profile of Zoom, and look for my collection of whiteboards. And the most recent one there, Lachlan's PD whiteboard, is available. Do I want to use it to present so people can't do things to it, or do I want to actually collaborate? I'm going to open the board in collaboration mode. And what we'll see now is that it is sharing the whiteboard for all of the participants. Can you all see that on your screens? Yep. And then we have to decide how we want people to participate in the whiteboard space. By default, you'll see this cursor option. I can see Caroline here moving around, other people in here accessing it. You could choose the pencil and start drawing things like crazy if you needed to. There are shapes. There are lines. There's a text tool on the left-hand side, so you can click on the text and start typing things. This amazing thing. So people are doing that. Probably, in my opinion, one of the more valuable aspects of using a whiteboard tool is to use the sticky notes. About halfway down, you're going to see the sticky note option. Choose a color and add a sticky note somewhere. And as you type more, it'll get smaller. And then you can move it around if you want to. Whoops, what have I done there? There's also an undo option. Isn't there, Lachlan? There's an undo option. Yes, there is, down the bottom here at the left. I think we've added in some kind of template thing. How did that happen? Anyway, you can see that whiteboards and collaborative spaces can go a little off track when you allow everyone to use everything, but that's all part of the fun.
I can just imagine, Tracy, are you thinking the same when you've got 28 students all adding at the same time in a classroom? I don't know about uni students, whether they'll all be that eager and keen.
Sometimes they do. It depends how much scaffolding is there. What I'm going to do in a second is open up a whiteboard where the instructions are a little bit more obvious and the parameters are I suppose, a little clearer. All right, so what I've done here to begin with is shown you all, I suppose, how to create a whiteboard and how to get everyone to jump in and do things. But obviously, as with any type of activity in teaching, parameters, scaffolding, instructions, clarity around the task, the expectations, all that stuff applies. So what I'm going to do now, apart from move my screen over here a little bit, is I'm going to close this whiteboard and if I'm still sharing my screen, I probably am. What I can see in the background here, this is what the actual address going straight to the whole whiteboard in the cloud looks like now after our activity. People will still be able to contribute to it after the fact. But what I want to do is actually launch a different whiteboard activity for us. So I'm going to find whiteboards in my Zoom taskbar. And this time round, we have a whiteboard in here that perhaps has a little bit more structure.
I like it.
Okay.
So it's not worrying about every child coming up to the board with a whiteboard marker. If you're all online, you can all just add in. Yes.
Yeah. And perhaps even more instruction might have been in order where I'm saying choose a sticky note and add in your contribution with a sticky note within each of the columns. I could go further and say, oh, if you're adding in a cooking activity, use a pink sticky note. If you're adding in a physical activity, use a green sticky note. And if you're adding in a different type of activity, right? So at that point, sticky notes on the left-hand side, choose your color, add in your activity. And I can see those being updated as people add those in. And this was as simple to create as adding in 4 different lots of text. I can also zoom in a little bit if you're having trouble seeing those. There's a zoom option down the bottom. Can we see that coming together now? How quite quickly you can get people with a little bit of structure contributing the way that you want them to contribute, probably, rather than just a free-for-all. Free-for-alls can be somewhat problematic within a whiteboard tool.
My next question is, can you do these also anonymously?
The answer is yes. I'm going to have to remind myself how exactly that works. At the moment, as the host, I can see who's adding. In your view,
like if it was students can't see what other students have put on.
They can see the other posts, absolutely.
Yeah, but not who did it.
Not who did it, no. No, they can't see who created the posts. So both Padlet and Zoom Whiteboards have that in common. They don't show the author of the contribution, so to speak. I can see it as the host because I can see Catherine's name or the other participants adding things to the board. But after the fact, no, you can't see who's doing what.
Okay, good.
All right, so we can see that. You can also see that there is a comments tool up the top. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but we have the ability to add comments in here. Personally, I would say if I'm using this inside Zoom, comments can go in the chat, but there is a comments feature attached to the wall itself that people might want to add comments that are sitting in situ, so to speak. They can add commentary to it. All right, so look, there are many, many, many templates available inside the Zoom Whiteboards tool. If I stop sharing, you'll see that there's an option to close the whiteboard at the top. And if I go back to my back end of Zoom again, I'm going to share my screen again and go back to my Whiteboards dashboard, which is just that first link, Whiteboards. The most recent one that's been worked on will always be at the top of the list. What can we do with this whiteboard? At this point in time, I can click on the 3 dots and I have the option to either duplicate the whiteboard, rename it, open it in a new tab, trash it if I need to, lock it so that people can't add further posts, or I can leave it live. If we click on the sharing option, you'll see, in fact, that we had people that came into the meeting that have added contributions to it listed there for me. But also we can decide whether or not people are going to be able to continue using it. At the moment, it stays open until we lock the board. The other options that we have really come down to whether or not we want to export the whiteboard and do something with it. You can also present. Once you switch to present mode, it's going to lock it. But really what I'm interested in doing is getting this exported. You also have the ability to upload PDFs and images to your whiteboard if you want to. You can attach those there, which is probably got some legs for you if you've got other artifacts that you want connected to the board. What I'm looking here for is export. There we go. All right, so we've got our 3 lines menu next to the title of the board up the top. And if we go down, you can see that we have the option to export our whiteboard as a PDF or an image, for example, or even as an Excel CSV file. I'm not sure why you would do that as a CSV, but you certainly can get snapshots of this and get a file that will actually capture the board itself as well as any comments if you wanted that to happen. If I hit export, gives me a file. That file ends up looking like exactly that. So it's a way of capturing those contributions to the whiteboard. So if you were using that week to week for different purposes, you could get that snapshot, that artifact, and then share that back to the student cohort, for example, if you wanted to. Depends what sort of evidence, for lack of a better term, you're looking to collect from the use of the whiteboard. So that's Zoom Whiteboards in a nutshell. Again, that requires a bit of playing around, I suppose, to get used to it, but pretty straightforward to create. The only trick to it is making sure that your share settings are correct so that people can contribute in the way you want them to and that they don't have to be authenticated users, so to speak. Because most of the time using this tool, you're going to want people within a live meeting to be able to contribute and potentially people in a subject site to be able to click on a link and contribute to it. Now, to the best of my knowledge, you can't embed a Zoom whiteboard. You can link to it, you can give people a hyperlink to go to it, but you can't embed it within a subject site the way we did with the Padlet wall. So there's no embed code option here that allows you to actually completely enclose the Zoom whiteboard. I could probably figure out a workaround for that, but to be honest, it's just easier to use a different tool if that's your end goal, is to have an embedded asynchronous object. All right, I'm going to stop there for a second before we start looking at Miro and say, have we got any questions, feedback, comments so far?
Did you have another example of that same thing with a template? Because this was just a plain background, wasn't it? Or can you have, is there like pro formas of different templates you can use? That
The
are already
templates
set
that
up?
they have all pre-exist. You can certainly click on any of them and use
Righto.
those. The template types are a little corporate-y, so to speak. They're usually based around project management type activity. So that's why you're getting things like Kanban tables and things like that going on. But some of them, like the mind mapping,
is that a timeline one, that customer?
Let me have a look. Timeline, customer to customer touch point mapping. Well, it's a continuum. I don't know that they've specified times as such. But again, you could probably configure it with labels yourself to match that purpose. I haven't looked through these extensively. There is a very big template library. So yeah, have a look through there and you might see.
You.
All right, are we ready for Miro?
Yep.
All right, I'll close a few tabs and then we can get into a bit of Miro, so to speak. All right, now look, Miro is described basically by some people as Padlet on steroids. I think I would go as far as to say, in my opinion, it's more like Prezi. If you've ever used the tool Prezi in the past, where you have a giant canvas that you can do a lot of things on, but you can also map out some kind of story or journey for people to follow, a prescribed way of progressing through the canvas, this sort of tool will allow you to do so. Now, at the moment, the Miro Enterprise account for CSU isn't quite finished in its setup. It's gone through all the legals. We've got a couple of weeks yet before you're able to sign in with your CSU logins. So I'm going to show you the free version at Miro.com today. But if you give it a couple of weeks, you'll be able to log into this tool and I will send around an announcement to everybody when it's available for it to be used. So today we're just going to have a look really at the interface and get a little bit familiar with that. You can sign up for free to Miro and it'll just ask for things like a Google login or your email login. You can register for free. I have signed up using my CSU Google login. It's taking me into my dashboard where I can create new boards. So the terminology for Miro is boards. You're creating new boards, which effectively is a new canvas. Again, you'll see a whole bunch of template types at the top that might give you some ideas about things you would like to try. There's a timeline builder tool in here, for example, Danielle, that you might want to have a play with. There are mind map options. I'm going to just start with a blank board so we can have a look at the functionality. But Miro also operates around this idea of teams. What that means is that potentially you'll either have a private board, which is just you creating it and deciding eventually to share it to different groups, or you can have a team board where you will have a bunch of people all with access to the same collection of boards. That's the way it'll end up being set up, and maybe you'll want to use that feature, the team feature. If I click on create a board, do I want a team board? Yeah, sure. We're not in the trial period yet, so I'm going to create a board for my team, my whole team of 1. And we'll see once it loads again, we've got this sort of canvassy grid look. I have a funny feeling that CSU Internet might be a little slow today, a little sluggish, which is why we're getting this kind of delayed effect. Again, it's asking me, do I want more templates? Now I've got people teams in me. Hang on, let me close that. All right. So here we have a blank canvas. Up the top here, there's a section that allows me to add in a title for it. Might be a good idea as your first port of call to give things a label so that you can find it easily later. Easily remembered label. Good idea, Lachlan. Hit share. Okay. I don't need to share it anymore beyond that. All right. So here's my blank canvas. What can I do on a Miro canvas? Well, firstly, I think what I want to do is to be able to share it to contributors. Now, here is our challenge until the CSU licensing gets set up. The only way that people can contribute to a Miro board on a free account is if the other user is also a Miro user. So they have to have signed up to be able to contribute. What I can do is that on the free version, I can also make sure that anyone who has the link can actually go to the board and have a look at it. So I'll drop that into the chat at the moment so that you at least can have a look at the board as I add things to it. I mean, having said that, you can also just watch me through this shared window in Zoom, but once the account's set up in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to just share the link and people will be able to come and contribute. Right now, under the free version, you have to be another signed up user to Miro to contribute. So if I haven't confused you there, I'm not trying hard enough. All right, I'm going to just show you a few different types of content that you can add to a Miro board, because really there's too many for me to go over today. Like the Zoom whiteboard, we have the option of adding things like text. Text goes in here. You'll see as soon as I've started to contribute, there's an editor above that determines how big things are, what font's being used, whether you want to add in bullet points, basic editing types, hyperlinks, coloring, shading behind the text, things like that. These are pretty common to collaborative tools, this sort of editor. You can also drag out your radio kind of buttons at the edges and move the content around if you want to. And if you click anywhere else, it's disappeared. I can now then left click and drag. But keep in mind, this is important with this type of canvas tool. You've got zoom options down in the bottom. You can also use your mouse wheel. The canvas itself is as big as you want it to be. It really is quite huge. So if you want to create sections within here and then just move things around, keep in mind that zooming in and out is something you're going to need to get used to with using a canvas tool for when you organize content. All right, so we added some text. What else can we add? I can add in a sticky note. Great. More colors, more sticky notes. You'll see there that, again, I've got different formatting options for the sticky notes. I can also give my sticky notes tags to organize them or filters. I can also lock them so that people can't change them later on. Maybe that's the thing that you want to do. But again, you can add different types of sticky notes in there. There are many different types of arrows that you can use within this tool, connector arrows. Maybe if I wanted to add that one, you'll see as soon as you hover over the top of any of the objects, it allows you to connect arrows between your different assets. So for example, I can now connect one thing to another. I also have the option with those connection arrows of putting in text. So if I wanted to do that, I probably would need to make it a little bigger, but we can do that. Where is the text going? It's very, very small. All right, hang on. Let's zoom in a little. Can you see it started to add the text in here? Right, so there's my text, and I can add in more text points if I needed to. This is if you want to put in descriptors onto the tool. It's a little thing, but sometimes it might be something that you're wanting to do. Let's add in some more content types. Yes, there are 1,000,001 shapes if you wanted to add in shapes, but what I'm really interested in with Miro is all the other possibilities, like the fact that I can upload files directly from my device, like let's add in a PDF. So I've added in a PDF and it then sits on the page and people can actually engage with that PDF live, embedded within the canvas. So you'll see it's going to move through the pages of that PDF and people could work through it effectively inside there. So that's one type of asset that you can add to a Miro board. Decide how people want to engage with that. If you wanted to draw connection lines or whatever, you could. What else can I upload? I can upload files that are saved in different locations. I might add in another type of object from my own device. This time round, I'll add, let's see, how about a PowerPoint file? This is an amazing PowerPoint. Yeah, I think the DIT guys put this one together because they wanted a PowerPoint that had the numbers 1 through 10. Amazing stuff. How do we do it? So that's a PowerPoint slide, believe it or not. But users, when they come into the board, you'll see that they have the option of clicking on download. So they can download the files from the board as well. We also have the opportunity to connect other apps to the board. So that might include actually embedding code. So remember we got the embed code before from another website, like a Padlet board. You can embed entire websites into your Miro board. So for example, I don't know if it's still there. Let's have a look. It is still there. That Padlet board that I created earlier is now actually embedded This is actually the Miro board it's copied. So a Miro board within a Miro board. That's insane. Anyway, the whole point is you can embed web pages within your Miro board is what I'm trying to get at. I think I have another Miro board that I created that I'll show you that actually has a demonstration of the different type of assets a little better than what I've been doing here. Let's have a look at that one. We just wait for the little hamster to finish spinning the wheel to load the internet to get the board to load. While we're waiting for that, I guess it's a little difficult to show hypothetically without our account set up, because ideally you want other people to be able to go into these tools and to be able to participate with them. But a Miro board effectively is a blank canvas that allows you to add an almost infinite amount of different types of content. But the thinking that you have to put into that is, what do you want that process of students engaging with the canvas to involve? And whether or not it needs to be stepped out following a particular process, or if it's just intuitive, they go to the board and they'll do something in the canvas space. And really the tool that Miro has that helps you do that, which is very difficult for me to demonstrate when the page won't load, is a tool called framing or frames. And a frame allows you to highlight a particular section of your canvas, and it will put a container around it, and then Miro will treat that as its own section that you can then present and people have to work through. think of it maybe as a stage. So you can have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. So you create sections on your canvas, almost like a storyline for people to work through from one to the other. And you define those by using the frames tool.
So while that's doing its thing, Lachlan.
Here we go. It's working. I can show you. Sorry, Stuart.
Yep. So that'll be single sign-on, so students have immediate access.
So the students will be able to come in as guests once we have the enterprise account. They won't have to sign up or log into the boards. Only staff will need to do that. Once you have enterprise, basically the staff member creates the account, and then they can share the board like Padlet to anyone with the link. They'll be able to participate with it without having signed up for Miro. Okay. It's just, we can't do that with the free version. That's why I can't show you that.
Okay.
All right, so the frames tool that I was talking about is over here in the nav, where you can see these crossbars where it says frame. Once you click on frame, you'll see that a crosshair has appeared, and I can now highlight which section of my canvas I want included. And you'll see now the heading frame 3 has appeared. And when I go to present, it will now work through the individual sections. See down the bottom how it's got frame 2 out of 3, frame 1 out of 3. So it organizes your whole canvas into sections that allows people to work through those in the prescribed order. It's, if you played around with the Prezi tool back in the day when it was available, it's exactly that same principle of defining sections rather than people just engaging with the whole canvas at once. And what I've got here on this canvas that I created previously was an embedded PDF that has been put within a frame, a text section with a bullet list that has hyperlinks in it. Again, I put a frame around it. Over here, we had some sticky notes, etc. going on, connection arrows. This is YouTube that basically has been embedded within the actual site itself. So that embedding or of a web page. And I mean, I've only really just scratched the surface in terms of the types of content. But if you're going to have a full blank canvas like this that you're going to spend time mapping out, it's almost like you need to spend the time storyboarding how you want the canvas to work as an activity. Because I would say from the outset, from my experience with this, that I wouldn't use this tool if I was simply going to throw students in there expecting them just to kind of have a free-for-all type activity. I'd use a much simpler tool for that, like Padlet or like the Zoom Whiteboard. Like this is a tool that requires time and thought about how the activity really is going to be going to work. Look, we're at time, and I'm happy to stick around for a minute and chat around any of this stuff. But I'm keen to hear your feedback on this, because I know it's quite difficult to demonstrate Miro, particularly when you can't participate yourself in using the board with the free version at the moment. But I am keen to hear your thoughts around that.
So before, when you showed that presentation, students would have to do that themselves.
When you share the boards on to people, they can either you make a choice over whether you want to share the whole canvas or whether you want to share the presentation as such. And when you're using the presentation aspect, that's when it makes them work through those different elements of it, the different frames.
So in presentation mode, it's static. They cannot contribute.
That's right. The canvas is an open contribution area. Presentation will end up taking that a snapshot of it as such and working through the stages. So yeah, there's a real continuum in terms of potentially different parts of the activity, whether they're contributing to sections, and then you present how each of those sections have worked.
It's quite good for tutorials, and then capturing, you know, what you've been discussing and using in tutorials. And we used it in DSS for team meetings when we're all on different sites.
Absolutely.
So
And look,
one
it's
should be able to
just
capture
before I
and
forget as well,
organise
there is a
it.
notes tool built into Miro up the top here, which is really pretty neat. It's a collaborative note that basically sits alongside the canvas that people can add things to progressively along the way as well. You can see the initials here as well of the contributors. For example, someone coming in. There are 5 or 6 different types of notes, but just the prospect of having a collaborative note sitting alongside the activity that people can contribute to as well at the same time is quite neat from my point of view. Not to mention the fact that you can literally add almost any type of file or external contribution into the canvas as well.
So if you wanted students to work on something, would it have to be synchronous or could it be asynchronous as well?
Absolutely can be asynchronous. You'd give them the link to your Miro board. They can be embedded as well, the Miro board, so you can embed them in a subject site. But again, I can't show it to you until the license gets set up so that I can get those codes to share for external users.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, it can be used asynchronously, Stuart.
Thank you.
So
Danielle.
can I ask a question about the notes, the workshop notes?
Yep.
Can you already have something in the, like, can you copy and paste something into the notes that's already there, like an agenda?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, you can paste in there. I think you can have a blank note. This is actually a template of sorts that actually has it organized into these sort of sections around takeaways and other bits and pieces, but you can just have a blank note that you paste in a pre-prepared area as well, like an agenda.
So when you have those stand-up sort of whip around meetings, you could have the agenda and then everyone just puts a post-it note on there as to what they're on. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking out
yep.
aloud as I'm, yeah.
Yeah, no, look, it's incredibly powerful. It's just that there's almost too many options. You know, you really
Yes.
got to, I guess, come up with some successful use cases for how you want to use it. And I've only really
And if your
touched on.
team likes
yeah.
it. Some
Yeah, that's
teams
right.
don't like it, some do, some are, it's, yeah, a good collaborative tool. Others, it's, you know, it's not. So yeah, no, I really like it. I love it. Thank you so much for showing. I'm so glad I came and looked at it.
It's a pleasure having you. What did you think, Catherine?
I thought it was fabulous. All three, actually, each demonstration. I can see application for this on quite a wide scale. I'm going to have a deep thought about it.
Yeah.
Terrific session. Thank you so much.
Oh, look, it's my pleasure. Can you see also why I tried to go, I suppose, easiest to most complex in a way? Because some people don't really want to put more in than create the Padlet, put it there and get students just clicking plus and adding their thing. You know, like it's very, very simple. And then more thought needs to go into each different type. Sorry, I cut you off there, Catherine.
Look, I was just going to thank you for another great session, but I will have to leave now. Really great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll see you at the next one.
You will.
So does this have